So the last time you saw my 2015 Corvette on the lift, it was to change the headlights. At that time, I found that I needed tires. So I've got new tires. I couldn't find the Michelin Pilot Sports that came on the car anywhere. They were all back ordered. So I went with Goodyear Eagle F1 asymmetric 3s. So I'm about to put the car up on the lift to change the oil. The reason that I'm making a video of changing the oil is that this is a little different. It's the Z51 performance package, and it has a dry sump oil system. So changing the oil on it is a little bit different than your average car. So I went to put the car on the lift, and I put the pucks in their slots in the frame. Let's see if I can get a video of where they are. Okay, this gray thing right here. If I can get my finger. It's hard to see, but there's a gray puck in here. It fits in the slot in the frame. I'll take it down. It's being stubborn. There it is. So that is what the puck looks like, and it fits in a slot in the frame, and then you give it a quarter of a turn and it stays there for you to put the jack pad or a jack underneath it. So I'm going to put that back in, and then we'll continue from there. So I've got the puck in place, and I'm putting the arm underneath the car to match it up with the puck, and not so much on this side. Oh yeah, it is on this side. I'm a little concerned that if I don't put an extension in the lift pad, that this part of the lift arm is going to come up and hit my fender and rocker panel and possibly do some damage. So the lift does come with little extensions that you can add to raise that puck up, or that lift pad up a little bit. Except now it doesn't want to go under the car. And last week or 2 weeks ago, I had it up on the lift with the Michelin tires, which leads me to believe that possibly these tires are not as high from here to here. And so in order to get this up on the lift, it looks like I'm going to have to put maybe a piece of plywood or something under there to raise the car up just a little bit so I can get it under there with the extension on the jack pad. I can't lift the car and hold the camera and try to put the jack pad under that way. So I'm going to shut the camera off and report back whenever I've got it up high enough to get it under there. So the first thing I'm going to try is to drive it up on some 2x10s. 2x10s in the back, 2x6s in the front. Hopefully that'll work and I can get on there. Plan B, if that doesn't work, is to put a puck on perhaps the back and jack up one side of the car. Get the arm under the front with the puck in place, and then I can use the lift to lift it up, hopefully far enough to get the other arm under it. I don't know if that'll work or not, because that other arm is going to come up at the same height as the one that's actually contacting the car. But we're going to try this first. It might be that I might have to put it in position and then jack up each end, put the pieces of wood underneath the tires, and then use the lift from there. So we'll see what happens. Well, here goes. Let's see what happens. Well, I think that's going to work. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but let's go and see if the arms will go under. So this side went in under perfectly. I'm expecting the same thing will happen on the other side. So I'll go do that, and we'll lift the car and start the oil change. Okay, now we're set. Got all the pucks in place and ready to race the car. Well, I don't know where in the lifting process it was whenever the battery ran out, but that's what happened. So, ready to go under the car and point out the differences between this car and your standard oil change. And I'm going to have to locate them again myself. But there are actually 2 drain plugs on this car because it's a dry sump. There's one here and there's one here. I don't know whether that's actually in the frame. I think it is. And then of course the oil filter is right here. I had put a Bosch oil filter on there, and I had made a note in my spreadsheet that I keep. And my spreadsheet I print out, I don't know if you can see this, but I keep track of what kind of oil filter, and I made a note that so the filter wrench fits, because I've had a lot of trouble with the wrenches not fitting the filters, even though they're the same size and they just don't work. But I went to the store and I couldn't find a Bosch, so I ended up with a K&N, which has kind of a 6-sided nut thing on the bottom of the filter to help you get it off. And then I have a note for the oil plug wrench. I have 2 plugs, 15mm wrench, and a socket with an extension, how much oil, what kind of oil it is, how to check my oil life, how to reset it, and then of course the final thing that is important is the last time I changed my oil. And that brings up another point I want to mention. It didn't happen on this car. It was on a Subaru Legacy that I had. And I was like in the middle of changing the oil when I had the pan empty. And I remembered that I hadn't checked what the mileage was. So I went in. I had the car down already. The oil was drained. The filter was changed. And while I was getting ready to put the oil in, I figured, well, I'll just write that number down, the mileage, while I'm thinking about it. Well, it was kind of a good idea, except by turning the engine, the ignition to on. I didn't start the engine, but just turning the ignition to on gave me a warning light that was, there's no oil. Well, I knew there was no oil. That wasn't a big deal. But what happened was, once I put the oil in, the light didn't go out and the message didn't go away. Well, after looking at the manual, a couple things happened. First, as I recall, I decided that is there something wrong with this oil filter, because I'm getting no oil pressure, got a new filter on there. The oil shouldn't make a difference. I knew it was in there because I had put it all in, but the light's still on. So the first thing was put the old oil filter back on, because I know that one was flowing oil. Well, I put the oil filter back on. The old one lost a third of a quart of oil in the process, and I'm now putting a dirty filter back on. And get back in the car, still showing no oil pressure. So I did a lot of research in the owner's manual and such, and I come to find out that that thing's not going to reset until I drive the car for long enough to get it up to operating temperature, which is absolutely ridiculous, because at this point I think it's okay, because nothing changed. But am I 100% sure? No, I had no choice but to run the car till it got up to operating temperature, and then finally it showed that I had oil pressure. So the big warning is, do not go in and try to get your mileage and turn the key on when you've got no oil in the pan, because on at least some cars, at least the Subaru, you're not going to get that light to go off. Or you know, I think I had a gauge, I don't recall, but in either case it was indicating I had 0 oil pressure. So I'm going to move this camera now, and I'm going to put the drain pan under it and start to drain this thing. So I guess I'm going to have to change my spreadsheet, because when I went to put the extension on it, although I did have a deep socket, so maybe that was the problem, but the thing I ran into is this with the long socket did not have enough room to get in there, so I used a wrench. So here's what would normally be the pan, if you will, the oil pan. That's the plug I'm taking that now. And this car, by the way, takes 9.8 quarts of oil. So I have to get my vent open here. That's what's spitting there. As you can see, there's not a lot of oil that's in that actual pan. The bulk of it comes out when you take this one out. So while this one's draining, I'm going to see about taking that filter off. See, now that obviously isn't the filter or the wrench that I thought fits. There's one frustrating thing about doing an oil change. I've got 15 different wrenches, I think, for filters, and it's a crapshoot as to whether they'll work or not. That one doesn't want to go on either. Jeez. It's one of my big frustrations. So I'm hoping that, that one's way too big. So I'm going to have to see if I can find another wrench. It is actually the one that I thought fit the Bosch oil filter, because the ones I have here do not. Okay, after trying several wrenches, this is what I ended up with. And I'll show you as soon as I get it to where I can turn it by hand. They get tight on there once the heat gets to them. And my hand strength isn't what it used to be. But there's the wrench I used. By itself, it was too loose when I tightened it. But I had one of these jar grippers, and I put that around the oil filter, and that gave me enough grip to be able to loosen it. So now I can take the filter off, get that started draining. This is always messy. I like my Jeep. My Jeep has a filter that goes in at the top, and I'll let that drain a little bit. It goes in at the top, so it's pretty clean whenever you take that out, because it's all the oil has already drained out of the filter. There's a few drops, but compared to these can types, that is a breeze. Now, I mentioned that the K&N filter I am putting on, I'm trying a new tactic for next time. And basically it has a place where you can actually put a wrench on it. I don't know what size wrench that is right now, but we'll be able to put that on. And before I put the filter on, I will put clean oil on this seal, and I will wipe off the old oil from the seat where the seal goes, so that we get a clean fit and don't have any leaks. Okay, that looks like that's going to be so. If that K&N filter works well, okay, comes off easy, that's probably going to be the way I'm going to go. I'm glad I didn't go to another parts store and try to find a Bosch, because let's face it, this one didn't come off easy with the wrenches I had. And you know, it seems no matter what wrench I have and what filter I have, they just don't work well. So if that K&N with the hex stamped into it is something that works well, next time I will probably just stick with them. Set that upside down and I'll try to close the camera with my elbow and go clean off my hands. So what I do to lubricate this seal, I take a can of oil or a jar of oil, bottle of oil, slosh it around till I get a little bit wet in the cup, dip my finger into it and just rub it on, because all you're looking for is a very thin coat, just enough to lubricate it so you don't tear it up while you're putting it on. And then once I've got that all lubed up, sometimes you have to go back and get more on the cap so that you can get it lubed properly. But once you've got that done,
unless you've got 3 days, you're not going to get this to stop dripping oil. So I just clean it up as good as I can and stick the new filter on there, making sure that you get it threaded right, because the last thing you want to do is cross thread this thing. There you go. And you tighten it till you turn it till it hits the base, which is about there, and tighten it 3/4 to 1 turn. So I'm going to move that out of the way, and I found out that it's a 1-inch socket that it takes. Possibly a 25 would work. There's somewhere between 3/4 and a turn. I went by the markings on the side of the filter to make sure that I didn't over tighten it, because if you over tighten it, you can pinch that seal and cause it to leak. Now, I'm not done draining the oil because I haven't drained it from the sump that contains the bulk of the oil. So I'm going to leave this one drip, and I'm going to take out that front one. Which is where most of the oil is. Summer gun was pretty tight. Should have gotten a longer extension. The long extension is really nice because you can stand back and do your thing. Might be tricky as far as getting them. I didn't put the back plug in yet because I want to let it drain as much as I can. And fortunately my pan is big enough that it can allow that to drip while the front's draining. So we'll let that drain until, I guess you couldn't see me taking it off. But you can see that the oil was draining out the front now. And we'll let that drain. When it gets empty, we'll put the plugs back in and go from there. So I was just thinking as this was draining that I do have a 4-post lift down in my barn, where what used to be a barn. I put a concrete floor in it, and I have a lift down there that I use mostly for projects. Problem is, it's spring and the lawn is damp and probably would tear up the lawn a bit. I don't have a paved driveway to get back there because it's mostly used for projects and storing lawnmowers and such. But if I think of it, as a matter of fact, maybe I'll make it a note on my spreadsheet that it's going to be easier to do this on the 4-post lift, because on the 4-post lift I don't have to worry about
these jacking pucks because the tires just drive up the ramps. And there's plenty of room to do the oil change because the middle of the lift is open. If you're working on tires, the 2-post is much better. Other than the fact that when you lift the tire up, you have to lift it up and put it on. With the 4-post lift, you can lift it up, put it on the ramp, and then adjust where the holes are, and then put it on in a second effort rather than all at once. So that there's advantages to both. I'm really glad I have both. I built this additional garage attached to the house, and I figured if I'm gonna do that, I might as well make it with a high roof, and then I can put a lift in it. And it has come in really handy because in the wintertime I can't get down to the one, if there's snow on the ground, there's no way to get down there and actually use the lift in the, I'll call it a workshop now, because the snow makes it impossible. So I'm gonna let that drain a little bit and then put those 2 plugs in, and then we'll put it down and add the oil. So that'll about drip forever if I sit here and wait for it to stop dripping. So what I wanted to point out is these plugs have a rubber gasket in them. What I used to do on older cars that didn't have that was I would just put a little dab of RTV gasket maker, if you will, or on there and tighten it up, because they had nylon seals in them and they didn't work too well after they got old. A little bit of RTV would stop that nuisance little drip that you would get from time to time with those. And these don't have to be super tight, but you don't want them to fall out. I don't think it makes a difference, but I like to put the one that came from the front in the front and the one that came from the back in the back. But I think they're identical plugs. I don't think they makes a bit of difference which one you put where. So one thing that I've been doing, and I just do it all the time when I have a car out, is I just take a quick look at how it's, how everything looks, basically. Underneath, while I'm under here, make sure nothing's going bad. Everything looks good under here. It's only a 5-year-old car, doesn't see snow, only sees rain if I get caught in it. I do take it if it might rain, or depending on where I'm going. Sometimes if it is raining, I will take it, but for the most part, it doesn't see too much bad weather. And like I said, never snow. So I'm going to move the camera and the oil pan out of the way and let it off the lift. So as I'm letting this down, well, the first thing I have to do is pump it up a little bit to release the safety. Never walk under the car whenever the safety is partway released. Not likely to happen, but bad things could happen. Once those are released, it'll come down. If I wanted to stop it halfway, I would get it to approximately where I wanted it to be and then raise it up until I hear the safety latches click in. And then let the pressure off again to allow it to settle in on the locks. I'll get this close to the blocks of wood. I'm going to stop and we're going to make sure they're in a place that's at least good enough. Just want to make sure that they haven't been moved. Now I can kick this out partway. Then I have to move the car back a little bit. Move them the rest of the way. Kind of a pain, but you have to do what you have to do. Whoops, and you didn't even see me moving those. I was kicking the arms of the lift out of the way. And as you can see, where the jacking points are, the rear arms will not come out all the way, so I have to go take the other one, pull it back, and then I'll have to move the car back just a little bit so that it can clear. But before I do all that, the most important part of an oil change is putting the clean oil in. Okay, so I gave a whole dissertation on engineers and why can't they consider maintenance whenever they design a car. And then I found out I didn't have the camera running. So, in short, a couple things that I mentioned was 9.8 quarts of oil. Really? Why couldn't you make it 10 so you don't have to fuss with trying to measure out that last quart? And then there was one case, my wife had a Eagle Talon, and the front struts were put on, and they had a bolt coming in from the back that held the strut on. The stabilizer bar, the stabilizer link was right in the way of that bolt, so that you couldn't take it out without taking off the stabilizer link. All they had to do was put the bolt in from the other side, and it would have made it so much easier to change. So please, if you're an engineer, consider stuff like that when you're designing a car.
So I'm almost done adding the oil, and it's worth mentioning one thing I do. When they ask for a part of a quart like this was 9.8, and you have to do that. What I do is I get out all the bottles I need. So I got out 10 bottles, and then early in the process of dumping them in, what I did was I put that 0.8 quart in at that point, so that if I accidentally poured more out of the bottle than I intended, I wouldn't be stuck with too much oil. What I would do is just finish dumping it all in, and then do the next bottle and try to do the 0.8 quarts. So once that's done, then you just finish dumping all the bottles you have out into the car, and you're done. So if you save that 0.8 till last and you accidentally dump a little bit too much in, that's not the best thing for your engine, especially if you have a wet sump oil system. This is called a dry sump because it basically injects oil onto the cylinder walls rather than relying on the crankshaft splashing it up onto the cylinder walls. So you get a little more power because that oil being splashed slows down the crankshaft, provides a little bit of resistance. So they've pretty much thought of everything whenever they designed the car. There's a couple things, like I said, they could have made the oil filler a little easier to get off. It's kind of in tight quarters, so if you've got big hands, or I guess in my case, my hands aren't as strong as they used to be, and that thing hasn't been taken off for a year because that's the oil change recommendation. It can be hard to get off, so you need a fairly good grip. So that's the last bottle of oil. I'm going to take my funnel out and make sure I have a rag. And I get down there and get it under the funnel so it doesn't drip. And I keep a can of where I put the funnel so that it drains into it. One of those. Replace the oil cap. Close the hood. When I get into the car, I have to remember to record the number of miles I had and reset the oil life indicator. But as I was saying before, those arms are not entirely out from under the car, so when I move it back a little bit, I'm going to have to get out of the car, kick those out of the way, and we'll be done. If you haven't seen my other video on an oil change, I'll show you quickly what I like to do for disposing of oil. I like to use an old laundry detergent bottle with 2 spouts. And the reason I like to do that is I can take off both of the
caps. And basically what I do is, if you notice one of the caps is higher than the other, put my funnel in the high cap, then I can look into the other cap and tell when the bottle's getting full. And then I can stop filling it before it overflows. That's one of the things whenever I always tried to put it back into the container the oil came in, you could never tell where the oil was, and I always seemed to overflow it and make a mess. It's much neater if you do this, as long as you clean out the laundry detergent bottle really well before you put the oil in it, and then you can take it to your recycling place. I take mine to AutoZone. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.